It's a pleasure to welcome you all to Washington, D.C. and Planet Word Museum today. We are so excited to be able to gather this group of executive communicators and narrative power builders in this space with one another, because we recognize at this moment in history, it will require all of us to make sure that we're centering honesty and truth in the efforts we are making to build a better world. And so I'm thinking of how I started the day today. Normally, I would not start the day around meditating or listening to music, but for today, I ended up starting the day focusing on diss tracks. I was listening to a mix of Hit 'em Up, I was mixing to Euphoria, like all of the different things because of the unapologetic honesty that are a part of these messages, and recognizing that diss tracks are something that we can learn a lot of lessons from, especially when it comes towards the messages that we're creating for leaders we're working with in every place and space. And so when we think about being unfiltered, unapologetic, and recognizing our power, it's going to be incredibly important that we lean into that and that we lean into the honesty with one another. Because as speechwriters and as communicators, we have a role in being a strategist and a truth teller. And so as we go through these sessions here today, I am so excited for us to be able to come together and make sure that we're bringing enduring lessons for folks to be able to use outside of this space and to continue to lead in making a difference. But before we start with today's panels and sessions, I want to first give a thank you and a shout out to our sponsors. First is our presenting sponsor, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, who for the second year in a row have really been able to come in and support our efforts to build community. I also want to thank our additional sponsors we have, which include Words Normalized Behavior, my business, the African American Policy Forum, the PR Habitat, Geneva Savvy Media, the Washington Association of Black Journalists, the Contrarian and Contrarian News, the Professional Speechwriters Association, Color of Change, and the Association for the History of African American Life and History. And together, we're able to bring you the second annual Speechwriters of Color Conference free of cost for all attendees, along with a full day of programming and meals and a reception for folks to build community amongst one another. And so let's give some love for all of our sponsors who are in the room supporting this work as well. And so without further ado, I'm excited to welcome our first panel onto the stage. So let's listen to Your Career as a Form of Advocacy that's presented by the PR Habitat. Come on to the stage, y'all.
I guess I'll start. Nice to see you guys all in person and on the live stream. My name is Jessica Floyd. I'm the Senior Manager of Booking and Media Relations for Punchbowl News.
Hello, I'm Damaryan Benton. I'm the founder of the PR Habitat.
Hi, I'm Brittany Geneva Cummings, and I am the founder of Geneva Savvy Media.
If you want to start with questions, I think to start off, just thinking through of this panel's topic around like career as a form of advocacy, thinking through of our careers overall, like where have you seen this idea of advocacy come through as you've kind of grown up throughout your career?
Yeah, I can start. So now I'm in a place where I'm very thankful that advocacy and my career are very closely connected because I work with advocacy organizations to help with their communications and media relations and executive visibility. So right now, my advocacy and my career are inextricably linked, but when I started my career, I was doing PR, doing corporate and consumer communications, not at all focused on advocacy, so I tried to bring it in other ways by advocating for my colleagues, advocating for people who look like me at work, and even trying to help clients think differently about the work, even if it wasn't like directly DEI or multicultural comms work. So trying to find those ways into bringing in that mindset and that value, even if it wasn't directly doing like advocacy communications like I do now.
Well, I started off as an advocacy intern with AARP, and I thought that that was going to be the career trajectory that I would have. I worked my way up through advocacy, but I found that there are a lot of different career paths that allow you to touch upon it, to bring it into the room in conversations where decisions are being made, and then also to have a little bit more of a different word that starts with A, agency, and making sure that advocacy is something that's seen through in action. So I think that through my career as a publicist in PR, as a journalist, and as a now basically a publicist working for media, I think it's been interesting to sit in these rooms and also be in the part of decision making when it comes to a corporate conversation that's going to be sponsored, and highlighting to them, hey, this is something that's timely and we should probably work this into a conversation and talk about this, or being able to also advocate within the business dynamics of a media organization. This is a story worth telling, or a community we need to focus on and engage. So that's where I'm bringing advocacy to my current career path. And I'm glad that I have those roots with AARP to understand the foundation of it so that it's a part of every day within this career.
Wait, I love that. I think even in both of these answers, and for myself too, I started in PR at an agency and then have now transitioned to advertising. And I think even with switching disciplines, the idea of advocacy is a constant. There's not so much of a difference in how we always show up. And for me, I've always had to learn that my advocacy has always been about like shifting power, and there's so many rooms where I felt very powerless, and I'm kind of just one in the room that just kind of has to kind of submit to my situation. And for me, it's been, how do I not just inform about, being a Black male in the space, having my experience have more visibility, because I think that's also been a really important factor for me. Of my advocacy can also just be me existing and having more visibility for other Black men and Black women to see us in the space thrive. And that's been a huge thing of access, is another aspect of advocacy I've seen come through. But yeah, I love that kind of showcasing, no matter what discipline or where you kind of are sitting in the space, like this idea of showing up for each other and providing this definition of advocacy to evolve throughout your career is really important. But yeah, I think going from that of like how we've seen advocacy show up for ourselves, where have you seen kind of that conflict emerge of you have your own organizational priorities? And I think your point too of having the chance to work at an organization that social impact is kind of the focus. If that isn't the case, or even within those organizations, it's not always rainbows and sunshine. So is there any conflicts, and how's that been able to be navigated for you guys?
I guess I could say from my experience, I think there is always going to be conflict when you're trying to advocate for something, because I think it's very hard to always get 100% of what your ask is. And so just understanding that and understanding where you can find commonality between the ask and the person you're asking it of is something that needs to be central sometimes, and understanding that that balance is the win at the end of the day, and understanding the true objective of what you're trying to move the needle on and how you're able to communicate that you've done that sometimes is the biggest workload in dealing with that conflict.
Yeah, so at my first PR agency, I actually was a part of helping start our first ERG. And that came as a result of the shooting of Philando Castile, where the Black employees were just very upset and felt like we want to be able to come here and have a place where we can have a little bit of solidarity with one another. Obviously, just because we walk into the doors of this office doesn't mean that the world shuts down or our brains shut down. And we had learned of other offices, because it's a huge global company, other offices had groups, and they were putting together discussions and having, safe spaces for people to talk. And so myself and the co-founder went to our office president to ask to do that, and she was ardently against it. She did not want to do it. She was very, I don't want politics in the office, because the type of work that we did was we worked for Absolute Vodka and Suave deodorant. So we definitely were not doing anything that was in the space of social impact. And so we really just that was a lot of conflict that we had to navigate, but we just didn't give up, and we started to incorporate people from other offices and other like influential voices in the company to sort of help be advocates alongside us. So it wasn't just the two of us, but other people were chiming in to say like, this is a good idea. Like, especially the New York, because I was in New York at the time, the New York office needs to be, you know, going along with this and not fighting. So that was a huge like moment of conflict, and it went on for quite some time, but by gathering and like galvanizing other people to join us, it really helped, and we were finally able to make it happen. Yeah.
Amazing. I think with and the PR Habitat's this like digital community I started last year, and it's now become a digital first community. We've gotten to come out and do amazing events like this, and work directly with students, and a lot of conflict has happened from that, and it's weird. Like a lot of this work that I think when we speak on advocacy, it's like we're doing some amazing things, especially when bringing people together. But then there are people that are trying to stop that. And, for the PR Habitat, we've had, our leadership board, we'll talk about our experiences, and you have organizations wanting to stop that, whether that's a LinkedIn post or thinking through as far as when we are kind of having the chance to go out in communities, and I'm speaking on the injustices of also like this lack of visibility, the lack of diversity within the field. When I entered, it was 3% Black male publicists. So it's been a huge point for me to consistently, be persistent in that kind of no. And, I've had those reactions of, hey, take this post down, or having the chance to kind of be like, oh, you're making a little too much noise. I've had that even from older Black colleagues that have given me advice to, to kind of be successful in their eyes. But modern day, that's where I think the responsibility of everyone in this room kind of comes to fore, of like, each one of us in this idea of what advocacy can mean or can show up in our careers, that's the ability for someone else to enter or for someone else to see themselves. And I really love that point of persistence, because there's a lot of no's in this work. Like I was not expecting in founding this, or even when we are having advocacy show up in the workplace, like it is a lot of rejection and isolation in bringing advocacy to the forefront, but the wins really, they don't take away from that feeling, which is really cool to hear. That goes into this next question too, as far as when you have the chance to kind of speak to younger colleagues, or if anyone watching that's on the younger side that is wanting to kind of enter this advocacy realm, but they're a little scared if they've had similar advice that have told them that's not the way to go, and kind of keep your head down, do what you're asked, and you'll succeed that way. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, I mean, of course I understand if your early career, and especially in the job market that we're in today, like don't want to necessarily rock the boat. So first, be clear on your values and know, what you kind of want to stand for, and do your best to at least be in alignment with that. And know that advocacy can happen in like a lot of small ways, like standing up for coworkers or asking questions that everybody wants to ask, but everybody's just too afraid, and you can be the one to say it. Or, even I remember at an agency that I was at, there were a lot of Black women that were really like having a really hard time. Like we were just all struggling, and there was actually a mass exodus of Black women that happened there because of like a lot of things that were going on. And I sort of like started this domino effect because I took a leave of absence when I was like extremely burned out. And when I came back, suddenly my calendar was filled with coffee chat requests to talk about how are you managing this, the burnout is crazy, and just taking all of those coffee chats and talking to all of the women who wanted to just find some solidarity and find some community and understand like, oh, so you get what I'm going through. I thought it was just me. I thought it was just my team. And it's like, no, this is across the agency. And so even that to me is a form of advocacy, because you're helping people build community and like find their own voice and be able to find the way that they might be able to navigate the situation better. So advocacy can like look a lot of different ways. And if you're like early career and don't want to necessarily jump out to like the boldest possible thing, there's still a lot of things that you can do to support other people who look like you at the workplace, and that is advocacy.
I think there's a lot of value in the back end work that isn't always seen when it comes to advocacy. To your point, supporting others, I think even helping them build a strategy plan for how they're going to advocate for themselves can also be a way that you're contributing. And then also thinking through, if I can't put myself out there completely, what else can I do to support this person? Whether it be, okay, you need me to write this letter for you and you need it to sound more diplomatic. I can do that. I can help you with that to get you a piece of the puzzle that you need to advance. So I think that even if you feel like you're not able to take a public stance, you're still able to contribute to the movement or somebody else's progress.
Yeah, I had to sit with that.
I would just add too, like one, I don't want to say easy, but maybe a little lower hanging fruit thing that you can do is like try to, if your company has some money that they want to spend, try to deploy those funds toward things that matter to you. Like I'm a part of an organization here called Thursday Network, which is the Washington Urban League Young Professionals. And they had an event and I asked my boss, hey, can we sponsor this? Sure. And that was advocacy because all of the places that those funds could have gone went to an organization that is supporting the Black community in the DMV area. So that's also a form of advocacy that I think is like accessible and something that no matter your level you can do because most companies do have a process for like connecting with organizations in that way.
And volunteer work. Some of the organizations have volunteer programs where you can take days off without it counting towards your PTO. So,
yes, we're actually trying to implement that in mine too. And I think for a lot of my struggles in this realization that it's not easy to do impact work and to have these opportunities kind of be presented to your older or your senior leaders, I've tried to kind of grapple with when I am having like implementing strategies, and we've touched on like what does that look like when you are trying to bring something or introduce something in your workplace. And yeah, it's really first identifying your values, but then showcasing the value in the company, kind of acknowledging them. And I always kind of bring up this idea of like professional identity because as you grow up, you're starting to learn really what you care about or what you don't like or what you don't, how did you navigate this one, that question of, what in the conflict, what'd you do? And there's so many things that you have to kind of experience first before you really know. And, after that reflection comes of, what does that mean for you as your professional identity? But I've realized I've kind of converged of that's just who I am. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of times where I've seen that kind of advice to separate, your work to your identity, like, to your, outside and what you do in your free time. And it's so crazy to think that was the way in which we did think, because even working on the brand side, and I know a lot in this room are working with executive comms and helping them to, be authentic in their spaces. And for me, even when we're talking about brands like that in agencies, it's like these brands are even talking about social impact. So for organizations to silence their employees' perspectives, it's mind-boggling to me. And as someone early career, I always want to push that out more of these organizations are the people that make up them, and you having the visibility or to showcase your perspective more, whether that's on LinkedIn or across the board in the workplace, it's so needed. And within the strategies, an example that happened recently was for, I'm an ERG lead for the first time this year for our LGBT plus collective, and we were called the Queer Frontier. And I don't really identify, I don't really like the word queer. And I had to, I was bringing that up of like, I don't think that represents me. And maybe that's a Gen Z thing or that's just me. But in bringing that perspective up, it then brought this idea of rebranding ourselves. And I know a couple ERGs, they kind of go by just what the group they are representing. But our agency kind of has a name for each ERG. So we were once Queer Frontier and rebranded to Camp. So within that, we then got additional funding through this rebrand, and it was just making me think of, I can have more ways in which we can support LGBT plus orgs and how we can partner. And this year we did the drag brunch, which is a common thing within corporations. But this year it was really awesome to work with a pretty prominent bar in Los Angeles, because when we were on the phone and we were in the process of working with them, they were like, oh, thank you so much for partnering with us, because we had so many of our corporate sponsors kind of drop out this year because of the pressure from the Trump administration. And that was a really sad call, because I know that it's already hard for them to, kind of survive in this economy right now. So to know that there's long-standing partnerships over a decade long that are dropping out from this pressure, it just shows like these are the experiences where we really do make an impact. Whether it feels like, I think with ERGs it's kind of like, oh, I just do that on the side, and it's it's with people I like. But you're right. It can really provide the financial backing for the organizations that we truly care about. I think to close out, I really do want to have kind of strategies and next steps for people that do want to ensure that advocacy is a point that they can improve on, and as well as expand on in this year going into next. So kind of going from those experiences too, where you did have to implement those strategies, building a plan, or where would you say you've had the chance to, one, improve on it, and kind of seen where you've had these like hinders in your process, but more so too, like if those examples have been really helpful, or that have helped others kind of learn how to implement it more?
I think the first thing is just like sitting with yourself and thinking like, what can I do where I am now and the resources that I have? I think sometimes it can sound like with advocacy that you have to do the biggest and boldest idea, or be the loudest voice in the room, or get the most followers and clicks and eyeballs. But I think sometimes like we don't realize that on an individual level in our own spaces, what we're contributing to individual conversations and closed doors, what we're doing to work with others and understand what do they need, is just as valuable and important as being able to put a think piece out on Substack and get like 1 million people to buy into your idea of how the world should be. I think that it's just sometimes a little undervalued, the power of an individual in this moment. And I think that that's going to be something that we're going to have to lean into a little bit more, especially with the dynamics at play in the country, because being out there on the front lines, very loud in a viral space, is more risky than it has been previously.
Yeah. And definitely acknowledging that, with all of the tips that we're giving, it's like that's the undercurrent of everything that, you have to be okay first. You can't advocate for anybody if you're not okay. So make sure that you're doing what you have to do to like survive in the current situation. But I think, in terms of concrete steps, like you were saying, finding those ways that you can be an advocate in your own space. I'm saying big or small, but I don't mean to make small sound unimportant. Just like regardless of the way that you're able to show up, like take up that space in whatever way you feel that you can, and be authentic and true to yourself in terms of like your values and what you stand for. I remember a time where I was a brand new manager at a brand new firm, and I came in, I was meant to be listening into a conversation about a Black woman being demoted. And I remembered I had literally just read an article about Black women not getting constructive feedback at work because people are afraid of how to speak to us. And I said, did she get the feedback? And I was like, I can't not ask this right now. Even though I'm new here, they probably were like, okay, new girl, like we really didn't bring you in to actually ask questions. But I was like, no, are you sure she got the feedback? Like, does she know that this is on the table for her? So finding just like, that's advocacy, finding any little opportunity to just make sure that you're asking those questions or bringing up those points that need to be brought up. And also understanding that, of course, advocacy being a part of your career is like, would be, that's the goal that we want to get to, but understanding that there's advocacy that you can do outside of your 9-to-5 that will give you that fulfillment and that purpose, then hopefully, those things can come together. But if it's not happening every day at work, there's certainly other ways that you can plug into spaces that will allow you to be that advocate. And, if you, obviously it's a difficult time right now, but if you're really feeling like what you're doing at work is completely at odds with your values, then like consider how you might shift and how you might be able to get into a space that does allow you to show up more authentically at work. Again, acknowledging that those choices aren't always as plentiful as we want them to be, but at least start down the path of thinking, what does that look like for me if maybe this place just is too at odds with what is important? Yeah.
You know, I want to touch on that too. I think everyone in this room, and this was said at the Ad Color conference last year, but the speaker brought up that when you're able to be submerged in rooms like this, with, you know, no matter if it's for, you know, a purpose, I think we all have the privilege to shake the table a little bit. And that's really stuck with me since last November of, you know, what are ways in which I can, you know, stand on the values that I think are important for my community. And recently I had an experience where we were on a client and we were kind of getting later stages of our creative process, and at that point we're talking music choices, especially for ads like this, these 15 second, 6-second ads, you know, lots of money goes into it, but we're at the, you know, the casting and the music choices, and we found these songs that were, you know, doing really well for us. And one song I noticed, I was like, in the creative presentation, one of the our senior creatives brought up, oh, it's trending on TikTok. This is a great win for both the millennial and the Gen Z audience. And I was like, oh, I'm wondering. I love the point of like just asking questions, because I think it's important just to consistently ask questions, because without context, I don't know if we're doing it justice. But I, you know, did some independent research on my own that night, and I noticed it was a majorette dance challenge of why it was trending, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's why it's trending, and it's coming from our Black community, and this is the, you know, historical roots to this song. And I just threw like a brief blurb in an email, and I got reprimanded for that, and it was because of, you know, I remember the word being, it was something around like, not important, but deprioritized at the time. It wasn't really needed to be said, which was communicated to me, and I stood on what I said. It was already sent, and I think it was like my cultural context also matters. I remember talking to this person. I was like, something I admire about you is that you come into meetings and you bring, you know, your cultural competency. You explain why, you know, we're not using certain languages for products, or, you know, why is the back translation of things, and you know, that's where I was like, oh, I felt empowered to do that, and it was a really good conversation. So I think in sometimes of kind of implementing strategies like this, you'll see a lot of, that conflict can arise even when you're having a strategy behind it and bringing in data and perspective behind these cultural moments. But I think that persistence in the stronghold of remembering how much responsibility you hold as a professional, it definitely continues to be my why, for sure.
I'd like to add to that sometimes people aren't ready to receive what you're saying in the moment. So you also have to realize that there's going to be opportunities to circle back and remind them, hey, this is something that I advocated for. This is something that I brought up. I think we should really dive deeper into this when it's an appropriate time and you see that they're in a better place, or if they're coming back to it. So I think that also not taking things personal sometimes. I know it's like the easiest thing to say and not the easiest thing to feel and do, but I think just understanding that you're able to see the play, understand what's going to come at your way when you're dealing with somebody who might not be ready for something, and just always seeking out the opportunity to revisit and educate them and bring the context into the room is part of the work.
Yeah, never get tired of betting on yourself, betting on your community, the people that have, I don't know, because I've always had this point too of like, I think for you in your career that you've gotten to be where you are, you know, there's definitely people in the back of your mind that, you know, really pushed you to where you are. And it wasn't just us as far as the full reason where we are today. And I think with that in mind, it's like, yeah, never being tired of someone else's kind of, like their lack of urgency, because you're going to win regardless. And I think that's that backing you always want to hold for yourselves and the people around you. But any last takeaways for the audience before we wrap here?
Stay in the light.
Yes.
Yes.
Know your own values and make sure that you are authentic to those at all time.
Yeah. And I think my last point would be, in my short-lived career, only 2 years in, I have had a lot of moments where I've questioned my belonging in this industry, and I can think back probably to, I can think back to the very moment I was sure I was quitting, in my like internship post-grad and PR, and I was like, there's not even I'm not even in, like, I don't see myself in my space. I've been the only Black male in my department still to this day, but at that moment it was a reality that hit me hard, because I think in school it's a great thing, because I feel like in school it's kind of gotten over this hump of, and it's so diverse and you're seeing so many people. That's a way out for people. I think that's where you see so many first gens, and then you get into the workplace and it's such a backwards view of where you can see yourself represented. And I was so close to quitting and letting go of this space. And I think reflecting back on that moment where I was having a panic attack and I was like, I gotta go. I really thank the Black professionals that have nurtured me and that have reminded me of exactly this, the advocacy, the power that I hold and that each and one of us hold every day to continue the fight. So I definitely want to leave you with that, of like, if there's any time that there's been a moment of that doubt, or even in the long fight of thinking that it's time to wrap it up, I want you to remember of that one younger Black professional or a person of color that was really depending on your existence and your presence in that industry, because it's helped me. Thank you. I think that wraps for us.